Thank you. Why not have an opportunity here to say, how can we best work with young people to get them a little bit more involved in scouting? So I think everybody had a chance to kind of see my bio there. I'm a retired analytical chemist. I worked as a scouting volunteer, as a cub master and assistant scout master, did different district and council level positions, including high adventure training. And then I retired. And since I don't play golf and I don't play tennis, it's like, what am I going to do? And it just so happened that there was an opening for a scouting district professional in the same district that I was actually working in. And so my wife says, well, why not give it a try for a couple of years? And I said, yeah, that sounds great. So 9 years later, I finally said, maybe it's time to retire a second time. So a year ago, I retired from scouting, but now I'm back to being just a plain scout volunteer. And I've really enjoyed working with the scout. I was a youth. As a youth, I was a Cub Scout and then a Boy Scout and an Explorer Scout. My son, Ryan, over here, was very involved with scouting as well. He's an Eagle Scout. And at the end, I'll have him come up and share a few words about how he kind of got involved. So let's go ahead and start here. Is there a presentation mode on this? I'm in it. Okay, great. So one of the things that I thought was interesting is, has anybody ever heard a little bit about the person Willie Sutton from 1933? Anybody around back then? He was a notorious bank robber. He robbed over 100 banks. And they say, why do you rob banks? And he said, well, that's where the money is, right? And so when it comes to getting youth involved with amateur radio, it's like, why should we work with scouts? Because that's where the youth are. It's a great opportunity. How many of you have been involved in Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, exploring, anything like that as a youth? Hold your hand up high. Boy, what is that, about 3/4 of the room here? So a huge number of people involved. So hopefully you have at least a little bit of a perspective. And I want to really get into a lot more details so that you have a better understanding how to engage with scout units and how best to work with them. I'm not seeing my notes up here. Okay. The arrow? Okay. The other arrow? Okay.
The next arrow, there you go.
But no,
You wanted his notes.
my notes.
Notes,
Yeah, normally you can set up the projector for that.
yeah. What it'll do is presentation mode with all the devices looks really bizarre.
Oh, is that going to come through on?
It'll come through on the recording that way.
Let me just grab my notes.
Okay, yeah, choose one.
One of the things that you learn in scouting, and of course, as a ham radio operator, is be prepared and always have that plan B, right? So here I have my plan B with my notes. Here, so let me just flip through it. So some of the things that I'd like to cover this morning is, I'd like to talk a little bit about the demographics with ARRL, and more specifically about age and so on. I'd also like to talk a little bit about generations. And so this becomes important as we're working with younger people. We need to understand that the different generation of cohorts of people are different in the way that we engage and interact with them. We have to be mindful of that. One of the neat things about scouting is that scouting and ham radio operators have a lot in common. And so that's going to be one of the ideal ways to kind of bridge that gap as we reach out to young people. Next, I'd like to give you an overview of the scouting organization. how it's set up, how it was founded, talk a little bit about the different scouting programs. Most of you are probably very familiar with maybe Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts, but there are actually a total of 5 different scouting programs, and each one of them represents an opportunity for us to reach out to scouts in these different organizations or program levels to get them engaged. And then along with that, I'd like to go into specifics on how do you engage with Cub Scouts? How do you engage with scouts in troops and so on? And then finally, how do we connect with the scout leaders to actually, put some of these things into action? So if we look at the age demographics of hams, you can see here in the graphic, there are several things that are shown here. We have basically the US population. So you can see that age 1 to 19, we have, 27% of our US population is that age range. And then as it goes across, you can see again, the tan or bar there, you can see the distribution. And then compare that to the ARRL, or the NCJ is the, anybody know what that is? Exactly. And so that's another way of looking at it. And you can actually see those two, the NCJ and the ARRL, are fairly similar until you get up in the 80s. And I guess we don't have too many 80-year-olds that are doing contesting, right? But what it shows you there is that if you look at it, there are very few people involved with ham radio under the age of 50. Right? So as I say, Houston, we have a problem, right? And I don't think this is anything new to any of you. We recognize that there really is a need to get more young people involved with amateur radio. So the average age of ham radio operators is 63 degrees, very few people below 50. So how do we get more people, young people, involved with ham radio? So let's talk about the different generations. Are most of you familiar with this description here? Starting with the builders, or sometimes it's called the greatest generation or the silent generation. And as you can see here, those are people right now that are age 80 and higher. The boomers, which I think myself, and I think a lot of us here are probably boomers, age 61 to 79. And these ages are approximate. The definition of generations is really kind of loosely defined. There's not one set of authorities that say this specific age range is this generation, but what it does is it helps to give us some classifications when we're actually working with the different generations. So in the right there, you can see we have Generation Y, also known as the millennials. We have Generation Z, or Gen Z as they're called, ages 16 to 30. And then we have Gen Alpha, and we're kind of going through the alphabet there, Gen Alpha, and the next one is Gen Beta. You can see ages 15 and under for Gen Alpha. That's a lot of your scouts, a lot of Cub Scouts, a lot of Boy Scouts or Scout BSA scouts that we have are either Gen Z or Gen Alpha. And in terms of, we're also working not only with the scouts, the youth, but we're also working with the adult leaders. The adult leaders in scouting typically are Gen Z people, or maybe millennials, the Gen Y here. So let's talk about the different generations, Gen Z and Gen Alpha. Compared to boomers, what do they have that's different? They all grew up in a very digital age. They're very comfortable with technology, okay? That's a great thing, because as we work with radios and so on, That should make it a lot easier for them to kind of accept it, adopt it, understand it. And for them, a lot of it's probably somewhat intuitive. I know working with my son growing up, sometimes with cell phones, I'd say, how did you do something? And he'd just say, well, I don't know, it's just obvious. And it wasn't always obvious to me. But this is one of the advantages in working with young people, is that they should be able to pick this up. Here's a couple of things to consider, though, is that in working with younger people, they're used to very fast pace, right? You know, you ever see them on their smartphone scrolling, you know, they're going like this, you know, they're taking in information really fast and just scrolling on to the next thing. And so they're used to things happening very fast. So when we work with them and we're trying to get them engaged, we have to think about that. We have to make it very fast, very engaging, very exciting. And the other thing along with that is that they have a very short attention span. Okay. They're also driven by purpose and social impact. So if you say to them, hey, we have a public service event, we have a run to the flagpole public service event, we'd love to have you come out, even if you're not a ham radio operator, we'll have you work with some ham radio operators, maybe give you a chance to get on the air and get engaged that way. Here's an opportunity for them to do something that's fun, but also in a way serving the public as well. Okay. And another thing that they prioritize is flexibility. So they're really used to, if something doesn't work, you know, they'll find another way to do things and so on. So that's important to understand. Also, skill development. They're very quick at picking up things and learning things, and they like innovative projects as well. So in putting in practice, basically, in working with these young people, keep in mind that we want to do hands-on. We just don't want to stand up and lecture them for a half an hour about ham radios and everything that we do and how we serve the public and so on. Want fast pace, you want a variety of things for them to try to do, and then challenge them to problem solve, you know, have them go do some fox hunting, you know, and see how they do with something like that. Have them work as a team. Put one team, you know, send a den of Cub Scouts or a patrol of older scouts out and have them do a fox hunt course and see how fast they can do that. And then when they come back, send out another den or patrol to do that and have them compete with one another. So things like that are really important. And then when you're done, give them the recognition, recognize, you know, their accomplishments, what they've learned, and you know, how they've been able to really serve the public better. So this is audience participation. I'm going to ask the question, what do you think that ham radio operators in scouting have in common? Yes.
Community service.
Community service, absolutely. What else?
Come on, somebody other than me.
Yeah. What?
Adventure.
Adventure, yeah. Adventure, fun, challenges, right? What else?
Worldwide.
Worldwide, yeah. Reaching out beyond our community, beyond maybe even our country, so on.
That's where hams are.
Yeah. Being prepared, absolutely. Emergency preparedness, general preparedness, yes.
Resourcefulness.
Absolutely, resourcefulness. Because things don't always go according to plan, do they? We know that with amateur radio, we know that in scouting too. Okay, let's see how he did. I'll kind of run through these here. So something I mentioned earlier is they have an interest in technology, right? As George said, we like being prepared as scouts. We like connecting with others, right? Whether or not it's locally or worldwide. We enjoy public service. We like being outdoors. And then finally, we like having fun. So as you can see, those are common bonds that we have with Scouts that will make this a lot easier. What I'd like to do next is show you about a 2-minute video that gives you an overview of Scouting. When Scouting first started, it started in 1907 in England. Lord Baden-Powell started Scouting, having been with the Army in South Africa, and then when he brought those skills back home, he thought it would be fun to teach young people a lot of the skills in terms of map and compass and enjoying the outdoors and exploring and so on, nature, survival, things like that. And that's how the Scouting movement started about 18 years ago or something like that. And then 3 years later, it came to the US and it became Boy Scouts of America in 1910. And then most recently, and I'll tell a little bit more about this, within the US, the Boy Scouts of America, we've changed our name. It's now Scouting in America, and I'll give you an explanation a little bit more about that later. But let's take a look at the video and cross our fingers, and hopefully this runs well for everybody, both in the room as well as those online.
You wonder how they're going to find their way, how to get them ready for the times you won't be there to help, how to help them to be strong enough, brave enough, mentally sharp, moral. They need confidence without arrogance.
That was awesome.
Skills without screens for the world beyond school and sports. Ready for emergencies, for challenges, for whatever the world throws their way. Prepared with what they have in their heads and hearts. What they can do with their own two hands. What they can do working with others and by putting others first. They need social without the media. A way to experience the real world in real safety. A place to be challenged without being overwhelmed. A safe place to explore the world and imagine what's possible for them in it. Where all kids are welcome and everyone has a path forward to new skills, advancement, leadership. Where their individual effort can create something invaluable. Something they will carry with them the rest of their lives.
So hopefully that gave you a little better understanding about the Scouting program. So as I mentioned, Boy Scouts of America started in 1910. It is one of the largest youth organizations within the US. At first it was all boys, but then later on, as we had different scouting programs, it evolved and we started including girls into programs. And now we have girls in every scouting program that we have. There are 5 main scouting programs. So let's kind of go through that and have you better understand. Whoops, sorry.
That one or this one?
Huh? Can I use this one? Or this one? Oh, okay, doesn't matter. Thank you. I forgot that I'm dealing with the online audience. I apologize to you for the last minute there. Anyway, there are 5 main scouting programs. So understanding the different scouting programs and how to approach them, because they are different ages, they have different focuses, that becomes important. So the first one is Cub Scouts. So it started in 1930. It's for grades kindergarten through 5th grade. And in 2018, because we used to have so many siblings coming to all the PAC meetings and so on, we included the girls in the scouting program as well. So that's worked out really well. Then as scouts get older, then they move on to what used to be called Boy Scouts, grades 6 through 12. A year after Cub Scouts had girls, they started including girls in troops. And it made more sense to actually change the name from Boy Scouts to Scouts BSA. So these are troops with those ages there. A couple other things that I might point out too is Cub Scouts are adult led. So you have the parents and adult leaders leading the Cub Scout program. With the Scouts BSA troops, starting in 6th grade, it's youth led. So if you ever go to a Cub Scout meeting and then later on you go to a Scout BSA meeting, you will see they're totally differently run. The troop meetings tend to be a lot more chaotic, and that is because you have youth, working with other youth, trying to learn leadership skills and how to work together in teams or patrols and so on. So that's what's happening there, but that's really important because we're trying to teach them leadership skills and responsibilities and things like that. Building upon that, then we have a program called Venturing, ages 14 to 20. And this is kind of like a high adventure program for older Scouts. And it's been co-ed since 1971. So you can see that some of our scouting programs have had girls involved from very early on. Kind of related to that and moving it on to on water is Sea Scouts. And again, that's ages 14 to 20, and that's been co-ed since 1971 as well. And then finally, we have the Exploring program. And this is also ages 14 to 20. It's a little bit different than the other 4 scouting programs in that it's really focused much more on either career development or hobby exploration. And it's been co-ed since 1969. And then kind of related to that, but targeted more for a younger audience, is called Exploring Clubs. That's grades 6 through 8. And so one of the ways that we can get youth of those ages involved in amateur radio might be to help start a STEM after-school program, a STEM club, to include amateur radio. Earlier this year, in February of 2025, BSA thought it made a lot more sense to change our name over to Scouting America, because we weren't just about serving boys. We were about serving boys, girls, and really the entire families. And so we wanted a name that was more inclusive of all of that and reflected that. So as of earlier this year, we're now known as Scouting America. And we're currently serving over 1 million youth here in the US, with nearly 1/5 of them as females. Let's talk a little bit about scouting principles. So the scouting principles are embodied in 2 things: the Scout Oath and the Scout Law. And I'm sure most of you probably are at least a little bit familiar with it, having been in scouting. And so it's focused on duty to God and country, helping others, and then keeping yourself physically, mentally, and morally fit. And then the aims of scouting is focused on developing character, learning about citizenship, learning about physical fitness, personal fitness, and then leadership. We're very big about leadership. And then one of the things that's reinforced a lot is our practices in being in the outdoors, and that's done through the outdoor code. So appreciating the outdoors and being out there having fun. So this is really important to understand when working with scouting, that Scouting in America takes youth protection very seriously. And so for the last 45 years, we've been really focused on making certain that all the youth within our program are safe. And that's done through a number of different ways. So we try to provide the most secure environment possible for youth members. There's a number of procedures and leadership selection policies that are done when we select leaders that are working with our youth. There's safeguarding youth training that must be taken online every year by our scout leaders to ensure that everybody remains safe. We also have something that's called 2 deep leadership. So whenever we're working with scouts, we need to have 2 Scouting America registered leaders present when working with scouts. And if there are any girls within that youth group there, we need to have at least one of those 2 adults be a woman. And then finally, for the scouts, we have something called the buddy system. So we always like to have the scouts together, either in a group of 2 or 3. And again, that's for their safety, their protection, and so on. So whenever you're working with scouts, just understand that there are 2 ways that we can work with scouts. One is as a registered leader with Scouting America, which allows you to do a lot more, or the other way, which I think most of us would have an opportunity to do, and that is as a subject matter resource for those scouts, where you're working very closely with the registered scout leaders. And that just ensures safety for them, but also safety for you as well. So there's never a concern about, maybe something that, somebody said happened, but then you have other adults there as witnesses and so on. If you're interested in getting a little bit more involved in scouting, I would encourage you to consider becoming a registered scout leader. And there are a lot of different roles. One of the simplest ones is a merit badge counselor. So you can be a merit badge counselor for radio, for say electronics. There's 139 different subjects that we have for merit badge, and that's for basically the older scouts, the Scout BSA scouts there. What's involved in becoming a registered scout leader? Well, you need to apply, and then you pay your annual fees for that. They'll go ahead and do a background check on you, make certain that you're acceptable working with youth. You need to also comply with California State's AB 506, which is the mandated reporter bill that the state put through a few years ago. So that involves a live scan fingerprint check and a background search that's done, along with also taking 2-hour online training course. And then, as I mentioned, once a year, you have to take about a 1-hour online training for youth protection. So if you want to get a little bit more involved, it's a great way to do that, and you can really serve our youth the best. But like I said, you can always just be a subject matter expert or resource and get involved that way as well. Any questions on that? Okay. So now let's take a look at the different scouting programs and how we might get involved with them. So with Cub Scouts, again, that's grades kindergarten through 5th grade. They typically have a monthly PAC meeting from about August or September through about May. And a lot of times they're looking for things for the scouts to do during that. And so if you want to come in and work with them and do a ham radio presentation, for about 15 or 20 minutes, just kind of pique their interest, not only for the youth, but for the adults there, this is a great opportunity. As you can see here, this is Ryan. He's actually speaking to Cub Scouts at a Cub Scout day camp, and we have our fire communications truck out there, so he's talking about communications to them. So like I said, this is a fairly short presentation. You work with the Cub Master, who's the pack leader, to kind of coordinate this. So this is a great opportunity to bring your equipment, do a lot of show and tell. Again, keep it fast moving, keep it engaged, have them come up, and different people can try talking on a radio or GMRS radio, for example, things like that. You can also share with them Morse code. And so here's an opportunity for them to understand that there are different ways to communicate. One of the things I love about explaining Morse code, and especially sharing it with younger people, is back in 2005, Jay Leno with the Tonight Show, he actually had a couple youth along with a couple ham radio operators come on the show. Has anybody seen this?
Yeah.
Okay, so you know where I'm going with this. So basically, they took these two young people, and smartphones back in 2005 were relatively new, but you know, youth are really good at text messaging, right? So SMS, text messaging, and he had a contest pitting them against a couple of very experienced amateur radio operators that were doing Morse code, and they had to basically flip over a card and then transmit that message to their partner that was at a table about 20 feet away, and then, you know, see who could do it the fastest. And of course, who won? Yeah, it was the ham radio guys, you know. And so this is really fun for them, yeah, to realize that, you know, even though it's old technology that's been around for what, 170 years or more, there really are some advantages to that. So that's always a fun thing to do. A couple of other ways to engage the scouts would be, like I said, doing a fox hunt, or just at least a demo right there in the multi-purpose room or wherever the pack meets. And then also have the scouts give them the opportunity to use FRS radios and relay messages back and forth. So again, a way to get them involved. So that's with the monthly pack meeting. Here in Livermore Valley, we probably have maybe 15 or 20 Cub Scout packs. So there's a great opportunity just within Livermore Valley. There are others up in Martinez or wherever you may live. And so there's an opportunity there. Another way to engage with Cub Scouts is that typically they have a week-long daytime day camp. And so a lot of times they're looking for a presentation either during the lunch hour for about maybe 20 or 30 minutes, where you could do something similar to a pack meeting. Or sometimes they have like 1 hour rotations of different classes and so on. And so maybe you could be doing one day, a 1 hour rotation, repeat it, you know, for like 4, 5, 6 groups of kids, of typically maybe 10 to 20 kids, and do a similar type thing in terms of a presentation and having them get involved. So, all right, next let's talk about the older scouts. So as Cub Scouts move on, they go on to Scouts BSA, grades 6 through 12. So they actually meet once a week, and there's an opportunity, just like with PACs, to go ahead and do a presentation. And again, trying to engage the youth in activities with ham radios. The best way to do this is to work with the Scoutmaster, who's the troop leader, the adult troop leader, along with the senior patrol leader. Remember, I talked about youth leading the troop. And so you'll work with what's called the SPL, and kind of coordinate that program. So again, show and tell with the equipment, again, Morse code, different things like that, fox hunt, and then again, letting the scouts work with radios and so on. Another way of getting involved with scouts of this age is they're focused on earning merit badges. And one of them is a radio merit badge. And so that's one opportunity where we can engage with them. Another is Jamboree on the Air. So that's coming up the third weekend in October. And then also assisting with LARC community events and so on. So continuing on, lots of other ways that we can get engaged. Talked a little bit about merit badge classes. These are typically 4 to 6 hours long over a course of maybe 1 day, or sometimes split up over 2 days. And the idea is that we're going to teach them information about the merit badge. Scouting America has very specific information as to what needs to be covered with the merit badge and so on. But rather than having a dry presentation, we want to make it fun and engaging for the scouts. lots of hands-on activities and exercises for them to do. Both meeting with scouts in the troop, at troop meetings, and then also working with them at merit badge classes. Here's a great way to really promote getting their ham radio or technician license. And how do we do that? Well, we can encourage them to go online and study. They're pretty good about going online and studying. Also, I think another great thing is a ham cram. And again, all we're trying to do is get them to take the test and pass it, right? And then we're going to work with them closely for them to really start to understand how to be a good ham radio operator. What we don't want to do is to promote basically an 8-week-long training course that gives them all the details about amateur radio and so on. Because for this generation, Gen Z and Gen Alpha, this is going to be way too long and too boring. Okay. That's it.
So how do they learn anything?
Well, you get your license, and then it's a license to learn, right? So that's where we want them to be engaged with us, working, community service events, things like that, and maybe have follow-up. And I'll talk about it, a couple other things. Get them on the air, right? And this is really the key thing. Once they take that exam, they pass, it's really, really important to continue to engage with them because we don't want them to go away, right? So one of the things that I kind of discovered as I was researching this a little bit is that ARRL has a $5 promotion for our youth to get their license. And so basically, if they pay their $5 for the exam fee, the $35 through the FCC to get their license, then when they have that license, they can fill out a form, send it to ARRL, and they'll actually send that youth a $35 refund check. So their total cost to get their license is only $5. Another thing that's really important for us is once they have that, we need to work with them. We need to say, hey, now let's get you a low-cost HT that you can use that works well for you, works well for public service events. And then we're going to have opportunities, both at community events and other things like that, to really have them get on the air. Okay. So again, promote getting on the air or other ways to get them involved with that. So continuing on, working with Scouts BSA. Again, this is grades 6 through 12. Jamboree on the air that occurs once a year. And I've forgotten how many years they're up to. I think it's like 57 or 60 years they've been doing this. As I mentioned earlier, it's the world's largest scouting event with almost 2,000 scout participants from over 170 countries. And we're going to have some events in different places. For this area Scout Council, they're going to have something up in, I think, El Cerrito, and then something over in San Francisco. So that's a couple places they get involved. And I've included links here, which I'll share with the club, and they can put in the newsletter this presentation so that you have all of that information. Okay, we talked a little bit about the community events that the club has here. I think those are great and a great way to involve scouts, either non-hams or new hams. Another thing that's really important, I know it's not sponsored by LARC, but I think it's a great opportunity for youth, is PacificCon. And one of the great opportunities that we have there, and I kind of worked with this, was that have Cub Scouts in uniform come to that event. They're wearing their scout uniform. They get into PacificCon for free. And then what we need is we need people to be docents. We want them to be able to kind of meet with the scouts like every 20 minutes with the next group of scouts, have them learn a little bit about amateur radio, and then kind of take them around PacificCon, take them around to the different booths, explain the different types of radios. What's the difference between a mobile unit versus a home-based unit versus a HT? why do you have different types of antennas? What are some of the different things? And one of the things that we'll learn is that there's a lot of different ways that ham radios can be used. And I know one of the things that'll get them really excited is the parachute guy. I've forgotten exactly what it's called, but parachute guy that jumps out at 5,000, 8,000 feet and then is talking all the way down. Something like that really appeals to scouts. So again, I've included some information here. If you'd like to help out with that, you can contact Roy Adam, WW6S there, and he could certainly use some help. Other ways to work with Scout BSA Scouts is consider scout camps on the air. So a lot of the scout councils have a scout camp. We have one here in El Cerrito Hills called Camp Herms. Sometimes we have events there. We also have camps like at Camp Wolfboro, that's up near Bear Valley. My old council that I was working with, Pacific Skyline Council on the Peninsula, we have a camp called Camp Ojado that's up on Huntington Lake, northeast of Fresno. Great opportunity if you want to work with them to go up there and set up ham radio up there and give an opportunity for scouts to come by during the week that they're there to learn a little bit more about amateur radio. And there's actually an award that they can earn, with scout camps on the air in terms of, making contacts and so on. Okay. Another opportunity here, peak bagging with ham radio and Summit on the air. Scouts love being outside, and anytime you can combine things like hiking, backpacking with radio, I think is a great opportunity. So here's another way to get them involved. You can reach out to troops and say, hey, we'd like to, next time you're going to go up to, say, Mission Peak or, I don't know, Mount Diablo or wherever, we'd like to come with you and we'll do some radio communications and let you be part of that. Other ways to be involved. First, field day. Need I say more, right? It's pretty obvious. Okay. And then the National Scout Jamboree that occurs every 4 years. It's coming up next year, July 22nd through 31. And again, you can either go down there as a scout leader. And I think really for this, you really need to be a registered leader, but it's a great way to operate. We have a station K2 BSA that we set up there, and we have typically somewhere between 30 and 50,000 scouts that will be at the National Jamboree for this week and a half. So they have an opportunity during those days to pop in and learn more about amateur radio. And then taking that one level further, my friend Dave Shaw here had the chance to also work in Norway as well as in Iceland, working with scout and scout leaders from around the country, or around the world, I should say, and doing scouting and radio communications. Let's move on to a different scout program. This is venturing. Venturing is, again, kind of high adventure level. So Scout BSA scouts, once they get up to age 14 or 15, they've probably been doing some of the same things in the troop, and they want to be challenged a little bit more. And this is where venturing is a great program for them to get involved with. So you can start working with them. You can either start a venturing crew or you can assist with one. And it is possible to have a specific focus with a venturing crew. So for example, I used to have a crew in San Ramon that was called Crew 911. And as you can imagine from the name, that had to do with emergency preparedness, and they were focused on CERT. And so that was a great opportunity for them there. The other thing that you can have with venturing crews is that they can be just kind of general purpose, general high adventure. But again, there's an opportunity for them to be more familiar with radio communications, especially when they're hiking, they're backpacking. They're in areas that you don't have cell phone reception. And so having ham radio is really a great add-on. And there's a link there that has a little bit more information about the venturing program. So we've gone through a lot of the different programs here. How do you take that next step? How do you engage with scouts? And so what you do here is my good friend, and I think he's still active ham radio operator, Phil DeCal. He's the district executive for this area for what's called the Twin Valley district. And so you can reach out to him by email or by phone there. He can actually connect you with a Cub Scout pack leaders or with the Scout BSA leaders to say, hey, you know, we're available if you want to make a presentation to your Scout unit or to maybe help out with the radio merit badge. There's myself there. My email is there, my phone number is there. Feel free to reach out to me. And then finally, we have a website called BA Scout. And this is where people can go to learn more about the different scouting programs, as well as where to find a scout unit near you. So basically you select the age program that you're interested in, put in the zip code, and then it will find the scouting units that are near you. I was trying this yesterday. It seemed like the site was somewhat down because when I put in the zip code, it wasn't responding right, but it should be operational. This is a way to at least find all the scouting units, be it a pack, a troop, or whatever around you.
There goes battery in the mic.
Yep. Okay. Do we have a backup? Just this? Okay. Are we good there? People can hear me? Okay, cool. Plan B, right? Okay. So thank you again for your interest in working with our youth and working with scouting programs. We really appreciate any involvement, any help that you can provide. And finally, I'd like to see if there are any questions. But before we do that, I'm going to drag my son Ryan up here, let him say a few words about how was it that he got involved or sucked into scouting and with amateur radio.
I would just say that the main thing is emergency preparedness is how I got involved. So through scouting and then being a part of CERT, and then we had Chris W6TRM hosting a radio CERT grill, and got dragged down to the OC, got to talk on mobile radio, and I thought that was pretty cool. So that's piqued my interest, and then got our ham license after that. But a big part of it's public service. People like to be able to give back, work bike rides, work other events, and just make sure that having fun that way. Kids now are really, really fast paced. My wife is a 6th grade teacher, and you just have to keep their attention spans are practically zero. They'll scroll past the video in 0.08 seconds online if they don't like it. So if they don't like exactly your explanation of how you're explaining something before they can get in there and just start playing with it, they'll just move on to the next thing. So having hands-on demos and everything else is really vital to get people interested. So
great.
Thanks.
Thank you. One of the side benefits of working with the scouts and working with young people is that I think it helps us to stay young, both physically as well as mentally. And so here's another great opportunity that really benefits us as well. So, are there any questions? Yes.
You mentioned both a radio and an electronics merit badge. How do they differ?
Okay. So the question was, how does the radio merit badge differ from the electronics merit badge? And basically, they're focused on different things. There are some similar things in terms of general schematics and understanding some of the basic electronic components, but a lot of it's different. And so this is something where it's easy for any of us to go online and simply put in search term radio merit badge. Or put in electronic merit badge, and you can actually see all the requirements. Typically, there's something on the order of about 7 to 10 different requirements, and then a lot of times there are sub requirements within some of those branches there too. Okay. What other questions? Yeah.
I taught the electronics merit badge in my son's troop one time.
Mhm.
And that's more generic electricity, you know, start with electricity, then move on to transistors and things like that. And at the end, they get hands-on soldering, learning how to solder. They actually have to buy the soldering iron, and which is not very expensive these days. $10, $15, you buy a decent one. And they get all excited doing those things. I had one kid that he was into building computers and changing computers, and he wanted to bring his to debug and do other things, and you can see all the kids jumping into the computer and trying to do things, and you just let him burn it or whatever. And the most rewarding thing I had in the Boy Scouts was when one of the kids in my electronics merit badge had his Eagle Scout meeting, and I was one of the participants. And somebody asked him, what was the merit badge that you enjoyed the most? Or what was the most exciting thing that you did in your Boy Scouts? And he said the electronics merit badge. And he couldn't remember that I was the one that was teaching. But it stuck in his mind that, and you know, that's a seed. That's something. Now I had my youngest son taking the radio merit badge at the Pacificon, and it's totally different. You know, they learn about Morse code. They bring a hanky that they can play with, and they have to do things. They talk about radio waves and how they propagate. They bring HDs. It's totally radio focused. The other one is more electricity and soldering and things like that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so great opportunities. And one of the things that Roberto said is that a lot of times in working with youth, we don't know the impact that we have on that generation until many years later, you know. And I think that's an important thing here, is that we want to leave our impact. We want to leave a legacy, basically, for our younger generations here. And I think there's a great opportunity with amateur radio to do that. Any other questions? Not, oh, yes.
How many local scout groups are interested in learning about ham radio? I reach out to 3 or 4 every field day and never get any responses.
Okay, so the question is, how many local scout units might be interested in ham radio? I would say start with Phil DeCal, because he can certainly give you the full list of units to reach out to. The other thing too is maybe, again, they may not always know what can you provide to them. And so if you go to like Cub Scout leaders and say, hey, are you looking for a program that would last somewhere between 15 to 20 minutes long at one of your monthly pack meetings? We'll come in, we'll bring a bunch of ham radio equipment, and we'll do some hands-on stuff and get them engaged, have them start understanding that, you know, well, a smartphone is a great communications device. It doesn't always work everywhere and all the time, right? And there are benefits in doing ham radio as well. So doing things like that, reaching out to the troops, and then also venturing crews too. Reach out to them and say, hey, you might be a kind of high adventure general purpose venturing crew, but wouldn't it be helpful when you're doing some of those backpacking trips and you have no communications out in remote mountains and stuff like that, to have a couple radios with you where you can communicate back and forth? And so there are different ways of, working with the units that way. Okay, anything else? If not, thank you very much. Oh, yep, we got one more question. Oh, yeah. Excellent. Yeah.
I wanted to offer up that, like, if you're an adult that either through a merit badge counselor or whatever, if you're going to be presenting something, try to make sure that you coordinated a sched or some sort of connectivity, because there's nothing worse than spending 30 minutes calling CQ
Yeah.
And not getting a contact.
Yeah.
And so if you're actually gonna go and actually make a presentation, you know, make a predetermined contact and look at propagation. So with our troop, we've integrated HF operations sometimes in different campouts.
Yeah.
So like 40 meters SSB is a great daytime band
Yeah.
with, you know, 100 to 200 miles coverage. And so the other thing is that depending on the age of the scouts, they don't necessarily want to talk with random old guys on the radio.
Yeah.
They want to talk to other scouts.
Yeah.
And so if you can connect up, so here are troops in Livermore, you know, have some kids that are not on the camping trip and then the kids on the camping trip, and then they can, you know, interact with each other that way. Just frankly, I've set up, you know, FT8 and other digital modes, and the kids don't care that you're making a contact with Chile or, you know, somewhere in Africa. It's like, well, what are you saying? Well, I'm giving a grid square. Well, that's super boring to them. They want to talk to someone else, have a communications channel, and know that that they can pass information or something relevant. But you really only have a few chances to make an impression. So when you make that impression, make a good one. So thanks for presentation.
Yeah, no, that's a great point of being prepared and having things like that set up. My friend Roy Adam is really good about having some contacts like over in Japan and stuff like that. So at Pacificon, for example, and when we've done Jamboree on the air, we've already pre-arranged to be able to contact them. The other thing too is DMR, you know, so even if the ionosphere isn't quite, you know, cooperating with us, doing things like DMR is another way of reaching out across the world. Yep.
Yeah, I have to get around the CQ problem and not have anybody respond. I had a group of about a dozen scouts come over. They wanted a demo, and it happened to be during a contest. So I had no trouble. I had a guy on talking to the dozen scouts who was actually one of the contesters. and he took about 20 minutes to 25 minutes to say hi to everybody. So that's the key. You know, listen for when Gary's on or Roberto's on.
Yeah.
But you'll hear them. They'll be the loudest signals. So they'll gladly give you a half hour talk.
Yeah.
They have to be quick.
Any other questions? If not, thank you very much for your attention.